Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer.com. Today on our 2014 Jeep Wrangler, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect. Whenever you're flat towing your 2014 Jeep, it is required that we disconnect the battery. That way it doesn't drain when we're going down the road and leave you stranded once you get to your destination. And that's where our switch comes into play. That's going to allow us to easily disconnect or connect it without ever even having to open the hood. What I really like about this one, once we have our cables and our solenoid installed, we're not going to have to mess with it anymore, unlike some of the other styles out there today. Now our solenoid, this is actually going to control our power and either keep a closed circuit for full battery power or open it to keep it disconnected. What actually controls that solenoid is a push button right here in the dash. That way it's going to be super simple to power on or off our battery. Well, as you can see, I have our key on. We have normal power. Well, once we push our button, everything will get disconnected. And having used some of the other styles where you have to go underneath the hood, you really can't beat the fact that you can sit here in the driver's seat and just push a button. Now when flat towing your 2014 Jeep, this is going to be one of 7 main components that you're going to need. The other 6 are going to include your base plate, your tow bar, your braking system, your diode wiring, your safety cables, and finally your brake light switch. Now the installation isn't too difficult, but it will take a little bit of time. Now one thing I would highly recommend picking up is a Spectra ring terminal just like this, and that'll make life a lot easier. And speaking of the installation, let's go ahead and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be working underneath the hood over here on the passenger side next to our battery. The first thing we're going to do is disconnect our negative battery terminal. So I'll loosen this nut up with a 10mm. We can work that terminal off the post. Now what I like to do is take a towel or something and just kind of wrap it around it. That way it doesn't accidentally get moved and touch metal. Now I went ahead and picked a spot that we can mount our battery disconnect. I'm going to mount it to this plastic right here next to the battery. But before we do that, it's going to make it a little bit easier if we adjust our cables. That way we have some more room to work and it'll be easier to hook up. Now we're going to want to adjust our cables to where they're sitting pretty much straight out. So to do that, it's very important that you take a wrench and hold this gold nut steady. We can loosen up the other nut and simply just turn that cable. And tighten it back down. I'm going to do the same thing for this cable over here. With our cables adjusted, now I'm going to hold it in place and mark it. That way I can drill a hole and we can secure it. Now I'm going to use a small drill bit to drill an opening. Now I went ahead and secured our solenoid. Now there's an identical bolt over here on this side, and the way I secured it is I used some small 1-inch bolts just like this, but keep in mind these are sold separately. Now over here on the positive terminal, we're going to have to disconnect everything. We're going to start with these 3 10mm nuts. Once we have those off, we can pull the wires away from those studs. We'll be able to lift off this. Now once we have it like that, we can remove this nut. You separate that terminal from the battery post. Now 2 of our positive cables are going to be permanently connected to our terminal. Well, we need to separate those 2, so I'm actually going to make a cut completely across right behind our stud. We'll be able to do that with a pair of snips. Now, since our two main power wires here don't have an end on it, we're going to need to put one on. So I'm going to use a terminal just like this. We'll peel this insulation back, put it over the bare wiring, and use a hydraulic tool to crimp it down. Now keep in mind, this is not included with the kit, so we'll have to pick one up separately. So here's what the new terminal looks like once it's crimped onto those two cables. So once we have that done, what we can then do is locate the cable coming from our disconnect switch, and it'll say battery cable on it. So we're going to take this one, and what we're going to do is connect this one with all of the cables here. So before we connect them, we'll take the included heat shrink, slide that over our cable. We're going to take the bolt that comes included, and if this one is a little short, depending on what style terminal you use, you may have to get a longer bolt. And so we will bundle these together and put our bolt through. And we'll put on a star washer and feed our two smaller cables through. We'll put our other terminal on. Then on top of that, we'll slide over another star washer and then secure it with a nut. Now you want to make sure that all of our wires are in line and nice and straight with each other, and then we can tighten it down. Now I went ahead and used our heat shrink and some electrical tape to cover up any bare metal that we had. So now we can grab our other wire, which will say battery post, and focus our attention on it. What we'll do is we'll grab our terminal that we removed earlier and place the end of our battery post wire over that stud. And using the nut that we removed earlier, just going to very loosely secure that to the terminal. Now, being careful not to bump up against any metal, we're going to run this down and put it over our positive post on our battery. And kind of position everything out of the way. And what I'll go ahead and do is first snug down this nut, which will tighten our terminal to the battery post. And once that is in place, we can tighten down this nut that's holding our cable to the terminal. And so now we're going to come over to the negative side of the battery and grab that terminal, slide it back over the post, and tighten it back down. Now the white wire that's coming from our disconnect switch, this is going to need to be grounded. Well, thankfully, the negative side of the battery is very close. So what we're going to do is run our wire over and hook it to the stud here. And we're actually going to use one of the nuts from the positive side that we had left over for that stud. So we'll kind of eyeball the length of the wire, snip it, and we'll strip back some of the insulation. We're going to take the included ring terminal, slide it over the wire, and crimp it down to secure it. We'll place it over that stud, and finally tighten the nut back down. Now this bundle of gray wire, this is going to get ran to the inside of our cab, and it'll get hooked up to our switch. So I'll go ahead and run that through to the inside and then show you the route that I took. Now here's how I ran the gray wire. I came up and secured it along the firewall to this factory wiring, over across to the driver's side, and ran it right down next to our brake booster. Now since this has an automatic transmission, it has an empty grommet right there, and so I just pushed our wire through that grommet and into the interior of our Jeep. Now we can focus on mounting our button for our switch that will turn on and off our battery. So to do that, I'm going to remove this panel. That way we can see in behind our dash. Now I'm going to use a plastic trim panel tool, which will help me pop this out. Or you can just use your fingers to try to pry in back behind there. Just kind of work it along the edge. And pull it down like that. Now we can choose our location to mount our switch. Now I'm going to pick right here in this area. You can use a different area if you want. However, just make sure that you have plenty of room to work and that there's going to be nothing behind here, because we're going to have to drill a hole into this. So I'm just going to use a step bit and take it one at a time until we get our button to fit inside. Take the backing nut off. See if it fits. Make it a little bit larger and then we can slide it through. Now I'm not going to push it all the way through just yet, but I do know that it'll go through there. And that way when we can run our wire up through, we can actually hook it up outside like this and make it a little bit easier. So I went ahead and just ran our gray wire just up behind our dash, up here close to our hole. And before we put it through the back of our hole, I'm going to take that jam nut, put it over our wire. We can fish it through the hole. And we're going to peel back some of this gray insulation to expose the wiring underneath. We can strip back a little of the insulation on the other wires. And then connect our switch to it. Now the switch is going to have some very small Phillips head set screws. We'll loosen them up. Careful not to take them all the way out because they can be tricky to get back started. And we're actually going to feed our wires through these small holes. It doesn't matter which color goes to what side. Tighten down that set screw. Do the same for the black wire. With everything connected, we can feed our wire back through the dash, push our switch through. We can tighten down our jam nut. Alright, now we can pop our side panel back on, and we're just going to push it in place. Make sure we line our tabs up. We'll kind of have to work it underneath this cover here. Once you have them lined up, just push down. Now back underneath the hood, we can take our included 7.5 amp fuse and put it into our fuse holder. Pop that dust cover open. Push it down until it's fully seated, and then close our cover. Now we're going to test everything to make sure it works, so we'll put our key in the accessory position. And as you can see, our dash is lighting up, our radio is lighting up, our interior lights are on, so we know the battery has power. Now we'll hit our button and everything should turn off. Which everything turned off, so we know everything's working properly. All right, now I went ahead and used some of the included wire loom and zip ties just to cover our wires, tidy everything up, and make it look better. And that'll do it for our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect on our 2014 Jeep Wrangler.